We are going to inspire some people to heal with this episode.
I can already feel it, darling.
Mm.
Welcome to the Aligned and Divine podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Smith.
And I'm your host, Olivia Thomas. We created this podcast to have a safe space for you to share, connect, relate, and ultimately to grow.
The goal of this podcast is to share with you the strategy and mindset necessary to align with your highest self so you can massively uplevel your business, your relationships, your self-concept, and step into your innate divinity to raise the consciousness of the entire planet.
We want you to know that you are always aligned and divine.
Okay, so this episode, we're talking about generational trauma, generational curses, generational everything, baby. It's all about the generations. And we're just talking about how do we get through, how do we recognize the different things that are passed down to us, the things that we want to keep, the things we want to take away, and how do we regulate that within ourselves, reconcile those things with ourselves, that way we can come out better and more on top, that we can take the things that we love and remove the things that we just can't stand and we can go without.
Ooh, that was so good. Oh my God. Perfect intro. Literally, I'm so excited about this. This is something that is near and dear on my heart, and especially as people of color, is such an important thing for us because there's a lot of generational baggage and trauma that has been passed down the generations. And there's a quote that's like, if you know better, it's your job to do better. So I think that really, really sticks with me. And now if you're listening to this, now it's on you. Now you're going to have an idea of knowing better. And now it's your job to do better and heal and take responsibility for your life and for your happiness. So I'm excited for this episode.
So when we looked up generational trauma, what came up was the definition that says the transference of traumatic experiences or stressors from one generation to the next. Today, we're going to be talking about not only the trauma, the curses that are passed down, but also the beliefs, mostly the ones that limit us, even down to the addictions. Like there are so many things that can be passed down. And when we were doing some research and stuff like that, we even talked about like, not only are things passed down because your family actually teaches you those things, but things are even passed down in your DNA.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
In your DNA. Research is showing that beliefs and trauma specifically, and even like things like PTSD can literally be passed down in your genes and in your DNA. And so it's your job to change that.
Okay, so when I first learned about generational trauma, generational curses, all of these things, first of all, the term generational curses comes from like a slave term in the sense that when slaves were born, if they were born from a slave, they were automatically a slave, regardless of what their race was, or if they have even a little bit of white in them or whatever, it didn't matter. If you remember, the term was if you even had a drop of black blood in you, you were a slave, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the term comes from, is that people are born into a life that they had no control or no say over how they were supposed to live. And it was considered like a curse. But in the same sense, like now there are things that get passed down from our family that we are born into that we don't have any control over, that we don't have any, like, especially in the beginning, right? And something I'm gonna steal it. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna steal the quote where it says, "Your pain didn't start with you, but it can end with you," by Stephanie Hutchins. And it's that's so true, because now today you have more control over things. The way that you choose to live your life is totally up to you now, right? And so you may start your life out with these different things that are the way that I always thought of it is like a foundation, right? You have this foundation, you have this building on top. Whatever that building looks like is your choice. The foundation is supposed to be like what your family brings to the table, how they set you up. And I used to always say that like my family didn't set me up with a good foundation. Like it was like not the best foundation. Like I love my family. They did the best that they could. They absolutely did the best that they could. But even before my dad's generation, the generation before that messed up my dad's generation. And so now it's like all of that leading up, having to like, it has to stop with me. And getting into the why about this is like, why would you even want to deal with the generational trauma? I think there's this funny ass like trend that goes on TikTok right now. I don't know if you've seen it, where they're like, do you want to deal with generational trauma or double it and give it to the next generation? You ever see that? And I'm like, Yeah, so that's basically what happened in my family is everybody was like, "Double it, give it to the next one."
Yeah.
And so then you kind of end up here in this space where you have like all of this baggage and it almost feels so overwhelming. You don't know what to do. So most of the time people just succumb to it. They're like,
Yeah.
well, if they couldn't deal with it, like what makes you think that I can? And I
Yeah.
used to think like that until I got to the point where I was like, well, if they couldn't deal with it, then I'm the one who has to.
Yeah.
Because, and this is one of the biggest reasons, and I'm sure that I'll talk about it in another episode because it's still something that I'm working on, like and healing. It's one of the biggest reasons why I didn't want to have children was because I didn't want to ever get to the point where I'm passing on my children things that I couldn't deal with. And I
Yeah.
felt like that with my family so heavy that I had all of these things on me from drug addiction, alcoholism to just money beliefs and foundational beliefs that I didn't want to adopt, but that were forced on me and I had to now deal with. I didn't want to bring that on to the next generation. And so it's been kind of my like, I don't know, like my Braveheart um
Moment.
manifesto,
Yeah.
really, to like not bring that on to the next generation, not even to my nieces or nephews, and that everything that comes to me, like it stops with me.
Mhm.
All of the generational trauma starts with me. All of the generational curses, all of the generational beliefs, they stop with me. And I will not allow that anything to go past me.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, when I going back to that original visual of like the foundation, I had to rip out the foundation that my family provided. I had to rip it out. And sometimes it's really, really hard when you have a family who obviously loves you in whatever way that they have a capacity to. And they feel that they've done the best that they can. And so they feel like you should be grateful for the things that you've done. And here you go, literally digging out the trenches and trying to like dig out everything that they put in. It could feel like you are like betraying them or it could feel like you're in my family I was disrespectful. That's what it was.
Mhm.
Is it was
Mhm.
disrespectful for me to even do that. But I'm so glad I did because on the other side of it, allowed my family to build a stronger foundation. It allowed my family to be able to have something that we can actually build on together. It allowed us to get closer. And the only way that I could have done that is by digging up the shit that they try to hide, by
Yeah.
digging up the shit that they try to think that just because they don't talk about it, it was gonna go away and it didn't because I saw it in their everyday action. It was calling people out, obviously in the most respectful way possible, because I wasn't calling people out their names. I wasn't doing whatever, but it was doing the hard work to reset that foundation so we as a family could be stronger. And I'm so grateful that I did that because on the other side of it, I have better beliefs. Like I already have enough as in our society today, we already have enough to deal with. Not even like not to add on to the generations that we have to deal with too. We got to go backwards just so that way we can go forward. And so I'm glad that I did that because now I just have to focus on me and my beliefs and what do I want to rebuild from here? Why do and from even going back to the other thing, now it's even opened up possibilities for me to even now want to have children possibly
Mhm.
down the line. It even opens it up. But that why is so strong because I would have never gotten there had I not done the hard work of actually working through that generational trauma, of bringing those things to the surface. The same way that we do it in shadow work, which we talked about in another episode. The same way that we do it for ourselves, doing that for our family is even harder.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have been able to done that if I hadn't have done the original shadow work with myself, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
bringing other people involved. So at least that's my experience in this episode. It's not just about me, but it's about like bringing my family and inviting my father into that space, inviting my aunts into that space, inviting my sisters and my cousins and my grandparents into that space where people are really uncomfortable. It makes them really fucking uncomfortable, and it makes me seem like disrespectful and the black sheep and having to have really strong boundaries and all of these things. It can feel really really hard in the midst of it, but I wouldn't trade it for anything because I wouldn't have it any other way, I should say, because now my life is so much better and my relationships with my family are so much deeper, and being able to heal those traumas, it allows me not to hold blame to them, not to be
Yeah.
resentful of them, and not to see them as just people who are holding me back, but just see them as people, other people who are just trying their best.
Yeah.
And it allows me to hold forgiveness instead of all and instead of just allowing that hatred to build up and see people that I love as people who are against me when they were just
Doing the best they could.
yeah.
Doing
And
the best
sometimes
they
the best
could.
they can is pretty shitty.
Right. But
But
it's what
but it's
they
what they can do
do.
at the time.
Okay, I love all of that. Everything that you were just saying really resonates with me. I think when I realized, I remember when I was journaling after doing months of shadow work and months of healing, I remember having a very specific moment where I realized I was crying and I realized that my parents are not going to help me heal. Like it's on me.
Mhm.
It's my job to continue to heal and continue to grow and do this work and then ultimately be an inspiration for my family, right? Like I can do this work and show how much it's helping me and helping me live a better life and attract better things and just be happier mentally, emotionally, physically. And then that can inspire my family to heal and grow also. I yeah, I and holding blame, I put that down too because that was a huge part of my shadow work because for a long time I held blame on my parents specifically. Love you guys. I know y'all are listening. Thanks for supporting. But I definitely held blame for my parents of my lifestyle or my limiting beliefs or not having certain things when I was growing up or whatever. And I realized that my parents were doing the best they could. People are always doing the best they can at the moment.
Mhm.
And I mean, of course, it's our job. Again, listening to this podcast is showing that you are interested in healing. And once you realize and once you identify these problems and these patterns and where you need to grow, it's your job to do that, right? And it is nothing but making your life better and making you a better person and a more regulated person. And it just, yeah, it really, really does. It's hard work, but it is ultimately so, so, so worth it. And we talk about we're going to kind of get into the how, and we talk about how you heal in a lot of our episodes. But I think this episode is really just to show and make sure people know that there is such thing as generational trauma and generational curses and beliefs that are passed down from your parents or your grandparents or other members of your family that you have to recognize, identify, and then work to change.
And that's literally the process. Recognize it, identify like the root of it, and then actually take action to change. And so let's get a little bit into like the how we get into it, like how do you do this, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to generational traumas, right? Again, that first step is recognizing it. And often often that could be the hardest part. I'm going to keep it a
Yeah.
buck with you because there's
Yeah.
so much that oh my goodness, I can't even tell you how many times that I've had like an epiphany moment where I'm like, "Oh, that's where that come from." Like,
Literally.
"Oh."
You
And
have to
you
kinda dig deep and, like, really let yourself get there, and then you'll
mhm.
be like, "Oh, I've always known that. I'm realizing it right now." Like, I've always known
Mhm.
it deep down, but then you kinda bring it up.
Oh my goodness, and that's the for me, in my experience, the ways that I've gone about recognizing things have been 2 ways. First of all, journaling. We were gonna talk about journaling. You can't listen to an episode of this podcast without us talking about journaling
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
we're gonna do it. I journal every day.
Me too.
But journaling and the other way is particularly when it comes to like the generational thing is conversation. So not only conversations with my family, but conversations with like people that I love and I trust. So the two that come out in my mind the most is Danny, my best friend, and my she's like my aunt, best friend, therapist, everything all in one. Absolutely love her. And she's my chosen family, and Morgan, who's my everything too, and my, chosen family. Like, because they both have been around my family, but they're not blood related in the sense that they, didn't grow up the way that I did, but they grew up around my family. Like we all grew up together, kind of. So are able to recognize the ins and outs of families, and they're able to see patterns that I don't because I'm in it, right? And that's one of the biggest ways that I've been able to recognize things and recognize patterns. But there are so many times I cannot tell you where, like, I will be washing dishes, just thinking back on a conversation or thinking back on something, and it just hits me out of the blue, and I'm like, "Oh, oh, the reason why my dad doesn't show me love and affection the way that I think that he's supposed to show me love and affection is because his parents didn't give him love and affection like that.
Mhm.
He never saw that. He doesn't know what it looks like. He doesn't know what a father like love and affection from a father looks like. And it took me a long time, especially to see my parents as they were children too.
Yeah.
And then once I got there, then I was angry at my grandparents because I was like, how could you do that because you did that to them and they turned out like this, you know?
Yeah.
And it would make me so angry. And then I had to think, oh, okay, woosah. I don't know what happened to them. And it's always going to be never ending. So it has to stop with me.
Yeah.
And so I would say, okay, so it makes my dad uncomfortable when I tell him how much I love him and I cry on the phone every time he calls and he just, okay. And I used to take that as like he doesn't love me or he's whatever. I never really took it like that, but I always took it as like, why aren't you taking my love and affection? When then I realized, oh, he doesn't know how to receive the love that I have. He
Yeah.
doesn't understand or comprehend that somebody could love him so wholly and unconditionally because he didn't have that, you know?
Yeah.
And so that gave me, it softened my heart and it allowed me to go like, okay, well, now that I recognize that, and I can see that because the way that it started there was I was upset because my dad didn't react to something the way I wanted him to react.
Yeah.
He didn't give me the love and affection back that I needed from him. And I felt like I was having to beg and plead for it. And then I realized, oh, this is
Yeah.
why. And then the way that I went about like the how of connecting with that was I had to tell him, listen, there's nothing that you could do. You've done a lot of shit. Okay. If you haven't done anything that by now that could make me stop loving you, like there's nothing that you could do. And it's not that and like us being able to have that deep conversation, it brought us closer and it allowed me to peel back layers of him. And I think the thing too that helped us in our relationships, because generational healing generational traumas and stuff like that, it's not just about what it can do for me, but it's what can it do for my family.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, what can it do for the people around me in the next generation? And that's what really mattered to me. And being able to peel back those layers, I think my dad really was able to be seen. And he was looking at me not just as like, "Oh, you're my daughter and I have to be this version to you, but I can actually be myself with you and I can tell you these things and I can." He was able to be seen in a different light in a different way that I don't think that he was very much used to. And it brought us closer. It allowed us to be closer. Of course, still have boundaries in the sense that remember you're my father. You can't tell me everything.
Yeah.
You can't trauma dump on me,
Yeah.
but I'm here for you, you
Yeah.
know? And it allowed us to get closer and that helped heal. And like now even he's still funny when he's like, girl, I sent him on his birthday, I sent him this long ass this letter. Okay. And he replied, got your letter. Like, and I was like, okay, that stings, but it's
Funny.
fine.
Yeah.
But just saying things like that, and it made me realize how do I do reject love?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do
No.
I, not receive love
Mhm.
that it comes from him?
Yeah.
So how do I live and fix that moving forward?
Yeah, looking at patterns, like looking at patterns in your parents, your family, or whatever, and then being like, "Oh, let me see if that shows up in my life." I love everything you just said. I want to say this story about like talking with my dad. So I had this moment with my dad. Okay, actually, rewind. I want to start even go further back. I
Yes.
think that it's so important, and I've gotten in an argument with an old roommate about this of like, I really think that you should be the most important person in your life
Mhm.
because and working on yourself because if you are healing and loving yourself more, I just really believe it helps you love other people. And what you are
Mm.
just saying about you recognizing that your dad had maybe had some trauma and doesn't receive love or gives love differently, you being able to recognize that came from you doing the work and doing introspection on yourself and
Mhm.
giving him grace. And so I think that is such a key part of life and healing and growing is like doing the work for you and then you are able to have so much more capacity for loving and understanding others. And that's definitely what happened for me when as I've gone through this journey, I have had like a very specific moment where I was like, "Oh, my dad was doing the best that he could. His
Mhm.
dad was
Yeah.
something else, and he and my dad is doing the best that they can." And we had this moment, like what you were saying about conversations. Like I had this conversation with my dad where it was like a very, very raw, very deep conversation, and we were getting kind of open with that and talking about he felt a lot of guilt because didn't feel like he was the best dad. And I, not it was just a hard, rough conversation, but it was so eye-opening and so, healing because I was like,
Mm.
"Hey, I understand that you were doing the best you could. Like, I love you. I turned out the way I turned out, and I love the way that I turned out now from my childhood and the work I've done. I love where I'm at right now, so nothing needed to change," right? So forgiving whatever happened in the past and being like, "You know what? Everything happens for a reason. You did the things you did because you were operating from a place of hurt and from a place um of being unhealed, and looking at that moment now and being like, okay, you can do better now and do better going forward." And it was just a really,
Mhm.
really beautiful experience, and I know it's very healing for both of us, that specific conversation, but everything around healing and forgiving and recognizing is so, so important.
We talked about how do we, kind of go about this with people who are willing to have conversations, but there are many, okay, of the, 100 or so different traumas and curses and whatever that I've had to deal with. There's maybe one or two or three that I was able to have those conversations about. Everything else had to be done on my own.
Yeah.
Everything else, I wasn't given the benefit or the grace of being able to have a conversation. So many things with my birth mom, so many things with like my grandparents that like or people just outright refusing to have those conversations with me because I want to know why. And I think a lot of my family, like even on my birth mom's side, that they're my nana, she's like, you want to talk about things I don't want to talk about. And I'm like,
Mm,
okay, we don't have to talk about them if they make you uncomfortable. But
yeah.
I still have to deal with the trauma of it. So if so how do we go through that? How do we get through those aspects and do that work and find a clear path forward when other people aren't willing to help us, especially if they are the people who caused the fucking trauma
Mhm.
or who are part of it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How do we move forward? I think the biggest thing for me, and I'm sure Olivia is going to want to expand on this, the biggest thing for me has been recognizing those parts of them that are in me. Comes into transmutation where I recognize those parts of myself. Like, like there's a point in my time where I couldn't talk to my aunt. For example, I had to hold really, really strong boundaries where I had to cut people off in my life. My aunt was one of them. And I could talk about this openly because we talk now, but our relationship we're still rebuilding our relationship, but I had to stop talking to her. I could not have her in my life because she couldn't have real conversations with me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to continue to be in a space with somebody or have a relationship with somebody and fake the funk. I wish that I could be fake, but I can't. You know what I'm saying? I wish that I could, but I can't.
Yeah.
That's just not how I operate. I'm not the person. And that takes a level of self awareness on my end of like, I'm not the person who could be at the family cookout and act like nothing's wrong or invite people to places just because they're my family. It's never been me.
Yeah.
And so for me, literally had to cut her off. And because I had tried and I had attempted to talk to her. And every time that we talked, it was surface. And I was like, I need you to have these conversations with me that are hard. And if you don't want to have these conversations with me that are hard, that's okay. And I respect your decision on that. But then you need to respect my decision that I can't be in relationship with you. And so the first thing that really helped me in those situations was having a period of separation, having that really, really hard boundary of like, you have the right to not want to speak about shit. That's okay. I respect that. But I have the right then, because especially if that shit is about me, I
Mhm.
have the right then to not want to continue in relationship with you or to not want to have the relationship to the same capacity that we had.
Yeah.
And even now, like our relationship is nowhere near what we used to have because I can't trust her. I can't
Yeah.
bring her into that space because of whatever reasons. There's a boundary there now. But
Yes.
I had to recognize it. I had to reach out and ask, even if I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to talk either. I didn't want to bring up shit either. You think I
Yeah.
want to have those conversations? No. But I can't be in your presence unless we do.
Yeah.
And then the next part of it was, then having to do that work on my own. I couldn't talk to my family about her because then all I would do is grow more resentment. If my family talked to me about her, my conversation was always, that's my conversation with my aunt.
Mhm.
I'm not going to talk shit about her to other people because I'm angry and I'm mad and whatever, because it's none of their business. So that's again one of the ways that I had to hold in resentment because I didn't want it to be like, okay, I'm just going to cut this person off and I'm just going to talk all the shit about them and I'm going to be whatever. No, it was like, how do we actually heal? And the only way that I could heal is if I could forgive this person, regardless of whatever their actions are moving forward. If I could forgive this person, if I can accept the aspects of them that they gave to me or that they attributed to me or whatever the case may be, I can pick the ones that I want to keep and I can leave the rest.
Yeah.
But I can't do that if I have hate for this person or if I'm resentful for this person, because then I'll hate those parts of me, especially if it's a person who helped raise me. My aunt
Yeah.
was somebody who helped raise me. She's a huge figure in my life. And so imagine if I kept that hate in my heart, it was hard to hold it in the middle of having all the grief of dealing with my mom's loss and Jen's loss of like all of those things. But I had to come to a point where if I let she could be the center of my hatred, even for things that she didn't deserve to be, that you know what I'm saying? You can have that for a person, or or you can choose to have boundaries, choose to not talk about them crazy to other family members because that's not helping the situation.
Mhm.
Choose to sit with those emotions, see them as a person, see them as a child of God is the thing that always helps me. Oh my goodness, it always helps me. As I see people as children of God, I'm like, you're a child in God's eyes too. And if
Yeah.
God could love you, so can I. I could just love you from a distance.
Right.
Might be a far distance,
Right.
but it could be a distance. And then I can learn to accept you for where you're at.
Mhm.
And that was my biggest thing, especially with my aunt, that taught me that to love somebody requires me to love them where they're at right now, not love them for the person that I want them to be.
Ooh. Yeah.
You know
That
what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And that's when I recognized, oh, people have different capacities. Her capacity is just different than mine,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And that allowed me to go, oh, okay. Okay. She's not the enemy. She's not this horrible person. She's not.
Yeah.
She's just doing the best that she can where she's at
Yeah.
to her capacity.
Yeah. That I literally just wrote that down. Not love them for the person that you want them to be, right? Like love them where they're at, love them for who they are, recognize they're going through their own shit
Mhm.
and not having these expectations on people.
Yes.
And then when they don't live up to our expectations, that's when we get upset. It's like,
Mm,
okay, if you don't even have these expectations first, then your life can be a lot more peaceful. I definitely experienced that with my mom. Again, I know my mom's listening. Love you. Me and my mom had some really great conversations lately about how my whole childhood we were very at odds against each other because I
mhm.
wanted her to be a certain way and she kind of wanted me to be a certain way. And we were always like, why are you like this? And she's like, why are you like this? But then we're learning and growing, realizing that we're just different people. We're
Yeah.
different people. It's okay. Like not reserving your love for someone because if they fit a certain mold, right?
Mm, mhm,
So that is has been such a key point for me and has helped me so much. And then something else that really, really helped me is forgiveness. Is realizing that again, we said this 1,000 times on this episode, but everyone is always doing the best that they can at
mhm,
the moment. So realizing if there's situations in your childhood or now or whenever when people are hurting you or not living up to the expectations you're giving them or whatever, forgiving them.
mhm.
Because I hate cliches, but there's that cliche that's like forgiveness or hatred is only hurting you or some shit like that. It's a cliche because it's actually so accurate. Like forgiving people truly only helps you. Well, it helps the world, whatever, helps everything, but it really helps you not holding on to this horrible feeling toward of resentment or anger towards something where it's like, "Oh, if you forgive them, I promise it's okay. It's okay.
Mhm.
Nothing's gonna your
Mhm.
world's not gonna collapse. They're not it's okay to forgive. It's okay to show love and to show, grace or whatever to someone, even if you have some anger towards them, it's okay to
Yeah.
forgive."
And even if
There's
they
this
don't deserve it, by the
even if they
way.
don't
Just because you
deserve it.
forgive somebody doesn't mean that they deserve the
Oh my
forgiveness.
god, great point. Even if they don't deserve it, but
Yeah.
forgiving really helps yourself.
Mhm.
There's this analogy that I saw the other day that was like, if a snake bites you and there's this venom in you, are you just gonna leave it? Because it's like, well, fuck them.
Yeah.
They're venom that hurt me. You're gonna be pissed, like leave it. It's like, no, take the venom out and deal with it. And that is only helping yourself.
Mhm. The thing about forgiveness is it can feel very vague, and it can feel very like, "Okay, I forgive them, but how do I forgive somebody?" Felt, first of all. But I think one of the biggest things for me when we talk about different ways to heal this is, like, I write letters.
Mhm.
Journaling is more than just like, "Dear diary, today I had popcorn for breakfast and I recorded a podcast." No, it's like it goes so much deeper than that. And for me, like for example, with my aunt, I wrote letters. I wrote her a letter, multiple of them. I wrote my birth mother letters. Mind
Yeah.
you, some of them didn't get sent, but I wrote them like literally wrote out letters about how I was feeling with my dad. I would write him letters when he was in jail. And then like as I got older, I would still write him. I write my dad letters all the time that I never send him.
Yeah.
But that I add into my journal. And I'm just like, it's a huge part of my why dealing with my dad. But like so much of that, you don't realize how much that affects you.
Mhm.
Where a lot of the time there's like levels to the forgiveness thing. And the first part of it for me, because forgiveness is a huge part of healing. You'll always recognize this pattern, you guys. It's always going to be recognize. You have to recognize what's going on.
Yeah.
You have to
Identify.
identify the root of it, and then
Yeah.
you have to go and act change. It's the same thing
Yeah.
with forgiveness. You have to recognize what it is do I need to forgive. You have to identify the root of it. For me in my aunt situation is like I need to forgive her for a lot of shit, but let's just say like I need to forgive her for loving me the way that she chose to love me because it
Mhm.
was a way that hurt me,
Mhm.
but that was the way that she chose to love me. I need to get to the root of it. Like, why do I need to forgive you like for this thing? And it was, I just had so much hate in my heart and so much anger towards somebody because to be fair, it's okay to have expectations of the people who are supposed to raise you that they're supposed to like do the most basic shit. It's okay if you're in the process of forgiving a parent who couldn't show up and be the basic level of being a parent. It's okay,
Yeah.
by the way, for you to have those expectations. So I had to get to the root of it of like, I had this expectation that you were supposed to be the certain kind of way because to me, you were my parent. But to you, I was a niece and you were 27 years old, didn't know how to do any, like you were still living your life. And like, I'm 26 right now. I can't imagine having a kid right now, let
Yeah.
alone a kid who's not mine.
You just said that and I got chills. I was like, "Damn." I would
Right.
yeah, I could
So
fuck up a
getting to
kid.
the root of it and then taking action, which was for me in that moment, which was like actually writing down the anger and why I was angry. And I'm mad at you. And it's okay for me to be mad at you for this reason. It's okay for me as a child to expect my parent to be my safe haven, to be this thing that, you're supposed to be the person that teaches me how to be myself. You're supposed to be the person that teaches me about the world. You're supposed to be the person, my safe place. And you weren't.
Yeah.
It's okay for me to be mad about that.
Yeah.
But then there's a follow-up letter of like, but you're a kid too.
Mhm.
And not only were you trying your like, I have to the way that I do it is I go into their shoes. Even with
Yeah.
my dad. I go into his shoes. Cause I talk about my dad now like he's a fucking knight in shining armor. But my dad was in and out of jail all the time. I didn't see him for most of my childhood. I got his letters though. I got
Mhm.
his letters from jail. And I would call him and my aunts would take me to go see him. And I was still daddy's little girl.
Yeah.
But like I had to forgive him too for not showing up the way that I needed him to show up because you weren't the father to me that I needed you to be at the time that I needed
Yeah.
you to be it.
putting yourself in their
in their
shoes.
shoes is
That's
so big.
exactly it's so
Yeah,
big.
because I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, you didn't have the example.
yeah,
You don't know how to be a father. You didn't know how to be a father because your father was shit. You didn't know how to."
exactly.
Right. And then it goes and then I go, "Oh, you were just doing the best you fucking could.
Yeah,
It sucked, but
it
it was the
sucked.
best you
Wasn't
could."
great. Right, wasn't great, it fucked me up, but it's like, got it, understood.
And that's what helps me in forgiveness. I think that's what helps anybody in forgiveness is just because we have this tendency, especially in our trauma and in these curses, to see everybody as the enemy and we're the victim. When you turn it around and you go like, actually, I'm not a victim to my circumstance. I'm not a
Mhm.
victim to my generational trauma. I'm not a victim to my family. I'm not a victim to the things that I'm susceptible to. Actually, these are all very much in my control. I could choose not to be a drug addict. I could
Yeah,
choose. I've never been to jail. I've never even been arrested.
yeah.
I don't have no kids. I got a dog.
Again, it stops with you. When you know better, do better, and I think you mentioned being an inspiration,
Yeah.
showing
No, you
people
mentioned that. You killed it
showing
on that one.
showing people in your life or your family that healing works, like being an
Yeah.
inspiration to them. I realized, like my little brother, I hope you're listening, Andrew, I love you. I realized that for many, many years, my little brother, I would nag him. I would nag him of like, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, don't do this. And then I realized recently, I'm like, you know what? Let me stop nagging him. Obviously, that's not working. Let me just talk about what's working for me and be an inspiration and talk about all the amazing things in my life and all the in the ways that I've been healing and feeling so freaking good and be an inspiration. Cause then if he wants to change, everyone kind of has to change on their own. Like you have to
Mhm.
decide to change on your own. No one's gonna whatever. But so I'm like, if he decides that he wants to change and heal and grow and up level his life, he can ask me or he can look to me and see what I'm doing. And I will be there with open arms to talk about my journey and my experience. And that goes with my family too. I know my family has some limiting beliefs and some trauma that they need to heal. And I've realized that that's part of my purpose on this planet is
Mhm.
being an inspiration to them and to people in my life of this shit really, really works. And
Mm.
it's, yeah, when you know better, you can do better and it helps you. And then you inspire others to do that also.
Mm. That's why I'm saying, like, all of this shit is worth it. To dig up
Yeah.
the trauma, to like recognize it, to face it head on, to do the what it takes to heal, which is shadow work, journaling. We talked about we haven't talked about this, but therapy and like having a regimen is something that's really important to me. I know Olivia wants to talk about a couple other things too, but my biggest thing is having the conversations, the hard conversations with your family. Having those hard conversations is really important. And all of those things make it worth it because when I get a call and my dad tells me how he was meditating today and he had to do X, Y, and Z, and he feels really good in his body. And like, and then
Yeah.
we have this conversation, and he'll tell me, he's told me so many times how watching me has helped him grow.
Yes. So,
And having those other conversations with my family members who like literally tell me that, I inspired them to
yeah.
go deeper, to do and live life differently because they don't have to live life in the trenches like they have been. They don't have to live life like that. I'm like, that's all worth it to me
It's
because,
so worth it.
oh my God, like these are the people I love and care about the most. You think I'm gonna be out here trying to heal the world and not heal my fucking family? Come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Exactly. No, literally, just some other ways that I've healed. Again, we kind of talk about a bunch of different ways on each episode, so keep listening
Yeah.
to this podcast, but,
Literally.
self-hypnosis, doing some inner child, inner love healing is amazing. Doing breath work, doing mirror work is really powerful if you're just looking in the mirror and telling yourself that you love you, is actually such a powerful way for healing and growth, but, yeah, those are a couple ways, but yeah, there's a lot of ways to heal. We touch on a lot of them. We can
Mhm.
email us, you can work with us if you wanna heal more, and you got this.
Yeah, dude, you totally got this.
You got this. It's not, I mean, yeah, like Mercedes just said, it's hard, but it's worth it. It's
Oh my
worth it.
God.
It feels
Yeah.
better on the other side of it, I promise.
Yeah. Every time I think of like things that are quote unquote hard but worth it, I think it's so funny because I try to like one of the ways that I'm working on like receiving an abundance energy is to not think that I have to work really hard for something to be worth it.
Mhm.
But what I think of is, muscle, building muscle,
Mhm.
right? Like a muscle, in order to build a muscle, you have to tear it.
Yep.
You have to tear the muscle, you have to nourish the body so that the muscle has the right amino acids to be able to repair itself, and then you have to continue tearing the muscle with these, and it's funny because it's not like you cut out your muscle open and you tear it open, but it's these micro tears that happen.
Mhm.
These tiny, tiny microscopic micro tears that happen little by little every time you move your muscle that help break it down and build it back up. And that's exactly what we're doing with this podcast. Is exactly what we do when we're up leveling in life and with the generational curses. It's like, what are the micro tears that I could do today to help build this muscle? How can
Mhm.
I nurture that muscle? What amino acids do I need to add into? And it
Mhm.
reminds me of that because you could tear that muscle, do micro tears in that muscle, whether you are sprinting, doing full on runs, whether you're lifting heavy weights or you're doing fucking Pilates,
Right.
okay? Or
Right.
hot yoga.
Yeah.
You're still doing the micro tears in the muscle. And so it helps me to think of it that way because I think sometimes we always think that we have to sprint forward hard and we have to be carrying all this weight while we're doing it in order for it to mean something. But you can do micro tears with yoga. And in this conversation, to me, like the yoga version of like the micro tears would be having the conversations with your parents or having the conversations with the family members or, right, journaling and doing the
Mhm.
mirror work, going to therapy. And then there's like running and sprinting full forward with like just
I mean,
blowing
sometimes
shit
that could
up.
be that could be conversation with your parents. That's
Yeah, sometimes that could be.
hard
You're right.
too,
You're right. You're right. You're
you
right.
know? But or writing a letter, whether and maybe you don't send it, just writing a letter and getting your feelings
I'm
out. That
burning
can
it.
be, yeah, and burning it, exactly. Like, it doesn't, you don't have to send it. If you send it if you want, but that could be a really healing way to do it too. So,
We would
yeah.
love to hear how this episode helped you or what you think of our podcast so far. So we are diligently asking you to write a review, whether you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because we love us some Spotify girlies.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for listening. Because 'cause I've heard, a few people that are mentioning that they listen, and I really, really we really appreciate it, and we hope that this is helping you, and we're gonna continue to learn and grow and give information and be a resource hub and be an inspiration because me and Mercedes are still working and growing ourselves. So this is going to be definitely a journey of watching us grow and watching our community grow and heal. And we're glad you're here and stick with us and write us a review.
Yes. Pretty please. With a wee bit of a cherry on top. And as always, check
Love
out the
ya.
show notes for anything that we've mentioned and follow us on socials because we're on there.
Yep. We're on there. We're on
All
there.
right.
Love ya.
Loves ya, we do.
Love ya.